Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, Vamos Español. In today's video, we would be talking about how to identify verbs and conjugate them. Now, this is particularly important in Spanish because knowing verbs and learning how they're conjugated and used in a sentence would help you know what's happening and who's performing the action. So, stick around to the end of this video to get all the tools you need to spot verbs and break them down into different subject pronouns. ¿Están listos? Vamos! Before we talk about verbs, we need to know who's performing the action, and that's where the subject pronouns come in. In English, we have subject pronouns like I, you, he, she, it, we, you plural, and they. Now, they act as the subject of the sentence, the person or thing doing the action. However, this is quite different from Spanish. Now, in Spanish, we take a look at this. Yo, tú, él, ella, usted, nosotros, nosotras, vosotros, vosotras, ellos, ellas, ustedes. Vale la pena mencionar que every verb needs a subject, and if you don't know who's performing the action, you will never know how to conjugate a verb. In English, we say to eat, to dance, to sleep, to speak. So you see that little to there? That helps us identify a verb. But in Spanish, verbs don't have to, and they don't start with to. Instead, they end in either AR, ER, or IR, and they're called the infinitive forms of the verb. So anytime you hear me say verbs in infinitive, this is exactly what I mean. Here are some examples of verbs ending with AR, ER, and IR. For AR verbs, we have hablar, bailar, estudiar, trabajar. For ER verbs, we have comer, beber, aprender, correr. For IR verbs, we have vivir, escribir, abrir, recibir. You'll never find a verb in the Spanish dictionary as hablo o comemos. You'll always find them as hablar, comer, vivir. The raw original form, the infinitive. So now that we know how to identify a verb, it's also worth mentioning that in Spanish we have two types of verbs. We have the regular verb and we have the irregular verb. Now the regular verbs are very easygoing verbs, those verbs that when conjugated, they mirror the infinitive. They follow a set pattern and they behave just as expected. While the irregular verbs, however, are the rebels in Spanish. They don't follow the rules and they like to surprise you. But how do we conjugate them? For the regular verbs, we're working with just hablar, comer, and vivir. And here's how we do it. So we take off the regular verb endings, that's the AR, ER, and IR, and then we replace them with new endings to fit the subject pronoun. For example, for AR verbs, or for every AR verb, we have o, as, a, amos, ais, an. So hablar automatically becomes hablo, hablas, habla, hablamos, habláis, hablan. For every ER verb, we add o, es, e, hemos, eis, en. So comer automatically becomes como, comes, come, comemos, coméis, comen. And for every IR verb, almost like the ER verbs, but in the nosotros, nosotras, and vosotros form, it's different. Let me see if you can do these verbs in the comment section. Now, not all verbs like to play nice. Some verbs just like to go rogue, and these verbs are called irregular verbs. You can't guess them, you just have to learn them over time. But let me introduce you to two of the biggest rebels in Spanish. We have ser and ir. Now, these are irregular verbs in all forms. Now, they don't look anything like the infinitive. So, learning them early would make it easier for you because you're going to be using them a lot. Stem changing verbs are regular until they're not, because the endings are normal, but the stem changes in most forms. Now, here are a few types of changes you'll notice across your Spanish learning journey. We have the E to IE change in verbs like entender, empezar, We also have the O to UE change in verbs like poder, dormir. And last but not the least, we have the E to I change in verbs like pedir, servir. Now, they don't change at all forms because in the nosotros and the vosotros form, they stay exactly the same. Verbs like hacer, poner, salir, and tener are chill until you say yo. Then you get a plot twist because they're irregular in the yo form, as seen in the table here below. With tener not just being an irregular verb in the yo form, but also a stem changing verb in the rest of its forms. Now, vale la pena mencionar que there are only two types of verbs that fall short of this glory in the yo form. And these verbs are dar and estar, because they don't end with O, but they end with OY in yo doy and yo estoy. Learning verbs in Spanish is more like dancing. You start off with the basic steps, which are your regular verbs, and then you slowly add tricky footsteps, which are your irregular and stem changing verbs. But practicing a little every day will get you up to speed and you can start speaking like a native. Dale chicos, hasta acá el video de hoy. Espero que les haya gustado el video. Si es un sí, por favor denle like y suscríbanse ya para que puedan ver más videos educativos y chidos así como este. Yo soy Chilaca de Vamos a Español y nos vemos en el siguiente video. Chao, chao.